In a small village nestled among lush forests and winding rivers in the heart of Nigeria, there lived a young boy named Odinka. He came from a family of humble farmers who worked hard each day tending to their crops and livestock just to get by. Despite their humble circumstances, Odinka's parents made sure to raise him with strong values of kindness, honesty, and generosity. "We may not have much in material wealth," his mother would say, "but we are rich in spirit, love, and community." Odinka took those words to heart. Though just a boy, he was always eager to help others in the village however he could, carrying water buckets for elders, keeping younger children entertained with stories and games, or volunteering for chores around the village temple. That Odinka has a good heart, the villagers would remark fondly. His spirit and actions will be rewarded someday. One afternoon, Odinka was tasked with bringing drinking water back from the river for his family's evening meal. His bare feet kicked up clouds of dust as he hurried along the winding forest path, two large clay pots carefully balanced on his head. As Odinka reached the riverbank and began filling the pots, he noticed an unusual figure taking shelter under the large rama tree nearby. It was an extremely old man, his tattered robes covered in road dust, and his face almost completely hidden beneath a wide straw hat. At first, Odinka thought maybe the old traveler was just resting from a long journey, but as he watched the stooped figure more closely, Odinka felt a strange sensation rippling through him, like his entire body suddenly became charged with static energy. The ancient man turned his head, and Odinka was shocked to meet a pair of eyes that seemed to glow with an otherworldly golden radiance, as if staring into the molten sun itself. Odinka opened his mouth to greet the traveler, but the stranger suddenly raised a bony hand. In an instant, an invisible force slammed into the boy's chest like a battering ram, sending him flying backwards against the ground hard. Odinka gasped for breath as all strength seemed to drain from his limbs. No matter how he tried to push himself up off the dirt path, some mysterious force was holding him paralyzed in place, as if the air itself had become a thick, immobile sludge. The old traveler slowly rose to his feet with creaking joints and shuffled over to where Odinka lay stunned and frightened. As he drew nearer, Odinka could see he bore strange markings on his face, swirling blue lines like intricate designs somehow etched into his very skin. When the strange old man finally spoke in a voice as ancient and creaking as leather being stretched, Odinka felt each raspy syllable rumbling through his very bones, as if charged with mystical power. "You have been chosen among your kind, young Odinka, for your noble heart and humble spirit have been deemed worthy by the guardians of the great balance." Odinka felt his mouth go dry with fear and confusion, yet he remained paralyzed as the glowing-eyed figure knelt on one knee beside him. But such gifts come with a grave responsibility that will test the limits of your integrity and courage like none experienced before. Do you accept the path that has been laid out for you since the beginning of the ages? Before Odinka could even process what was happening, the old traveler pressed a twisted finger to the boy's forehead. A searing blast of heat shattered through Odinka's skull, followed by a kaleidoscope of blinding colors exploding across his vision. Odinka barely managed to croak out a terrified affirmative before losing his grasp on consciousness completely. When the village boy finally awoke some time later, the old man with glowing eyes was gone. Night had already fallen, but the full moon provided enough light to see he was alone on the river path. At first, Odinka thought the bizarre encounter must have been some sort of fever dream or hallucination brought on by heat stroke. That was, until he glanced down at his chest and let out a muted gasp. Etched into the skin over his heart was a strange symbol he had never seen before, an intricate spiral pattern with blue flecks swirling within, like a mystical brand burned into his very flesh. Odinka's trembling fingers traced over the raised marking, wincing at how raw and painful it felt. Had that old traveler somehow placed this symbol there? And what did it mean exactly? As he rose unsteadily to his feet, the empty clay pots lay forgotten in the dirt. There was no doubt in Odinka's mind now his life would be forever changed after this day. The young village boy had been marked for some grave purpose, however terrifying and unknown it may be. And so it was that Odinka began his life's journey on the path that had been foretold. Path of great power, greater choices, and a burden that would test the very limits of his courage and integrity. The weeks and months after Odinka's strange encounter by the riverside seemed to pass like a blur. He had tried in vain to share the tale with his parents and friends in the village, only to be dismissed or teased for his fanciful imagination. "You must have simply hit your head or fallen ill from being out in the hot fields for too long," his father chuckled as Odinka showed them the swirling spiral mark branded on his chest. No one aside from Odinka seemed able to visibly see or feel the raised etching that now served as a permanent reminder of the bizarre events that day. And so the young boy resigned himself to keeping that profound yet troubling experience to himself as the days marched on. He continued with his normal chores and routines around the village, all while haunted by a growing sense of anxious anticipation deep in his soul. What had the glowing-eyed old shaman meant by him being chosen? What exactly was this so-called gift Odinka now found himself burdened with, and what would be the costs of claiming any such powers? Try as he might to shake those unanswered questions from his thoughts, Odinka found the strange spiral marking on his torso had an odd way of pulling his focus inward like a whirling vortex anytime he was idle or relaxing. Each night as he settled into his sleeping mat, he couldn't help studying the raised markings in the glowing firelight, tracing the whirling patterns as if to decode their secrets. And then, one warm evening nearly a year after his inexplicable encounter at the riverside, Odinka experienced another event that would change his world forever. He had been sent to gather bundles of dried firewood from the forest, as was his evening chore. As Odinka meandered beneath the canopy of trees, tying together knotted branches, he felt that familiar tingling sensation creep up his spine, raising the hairs on his arms. The spiral marking on his chest had begun to subtly pulsate, as if gaining strength and energy of its own, independent of Odinka himself. Suddenly, Odinka became aware of a presence watching him from somewhere within the dense forest. Looking around fearfully, his eyes widened as a looming silhouette towered overhead, a giant of a figure almost 8 feet tall and draped in ornate, flowing robes. As Odinka opened his mouth to scream, the impossibly tall figure emerged into a shaft of golden light. The boy's cry was choked off in his throat as he registered the swirling markings, similar to his own, that covered the towering being's face and body. "Do not be afraid, child," the giant rumbled out, its voice as resonant as a bullhorn yet containing layers of multiple tones and pitches all woven together. "We have been awaiting your emergence ever since you were blessed with the emblem those many months ago." "What are you?" Odinka choked out in stunned terror as the giant loomed closer. Its glowing eyes seemed to pierce straight through to the boy's very soul. "Is this a dream?" "We are ancient ones," the being replied in an unearthly voice, "tasked as guardians to maintain the great balance of this realm and all others. What you had assumed to be dreams and fairy tales are simply fragments of the true origins of this world that your people's memories have long forgotten." Before Odinka could react, the towering being extended 2 fingers towards the spiral marking on the boy's chest. Instantly, Odinka's entire body felt like it had been plunged into searing flames as the pattern on his torso blazed forth with brilliant blue illumination. A whirling vortex of indescribable colors and sensations exploded outward from Odinka's chest, swirling around him in a dizzying maelstrom. The young boy felt himself being tugged off his feet and pulled inward, as if the spiral emblem had become a black hole swallowing him into its depths. Odinka wanted to scream, but his voice was stolen by the ferocious energies pummeling his body from all sides. Coherent thoughts scattered like leaves in a tornado as reality itself seemed to bend and distort around him. He could feel the very fabrics of time and space stretching and twisting in grotesque ways. Just when the boy felt he could endure no more of the cosmic onslaught, everything stuttered to a halt as abruptly as it had begun. Odinka's vision slowly cleared to reveal he was now somewhere else entirely. Blinking with dazed confusion, he realized he seemed to be standing in the open courtyard of some immense palace constructed from stone and gleaming precious metals. The lush greenery and forest canopy he was so accustomed to was now replaced by the harsh backdrop of a desert lit by 2 blazing suns hanging in a crimson sky. "Where have you taken me?" Odinka managed to squeak out, his voice shaking with terror and awe. The towering guardian being suddenly materialized beside him once more in a swirl of glowing particles. Its appearance here in this strange new realm seemed bizarrely fitting somehow. "We have brought your spiritual essence to the crossways, the infinite nexus that intersects all planes of existence. Across this and infinite other realms," the being's voice reverberated powerfully. "Here you shall be granted access to abilities and tools beyond the comprehension of mortal minds." With a wave of one hand, ornate circular platforms and stone tables began rising from the courtyard floor, covered in all manner of mysterious artifacts and glowing crystals that seemed to hum with palpable energy. These are the instruments you shall learn to wield and master your newfound power and influence over the physical world, the guardian intoned solemnly. To Odinka's utter shock, one of the artifacts hovering toward him seemed to be an ornate crown wrought of pure gold and set with large ruby gemstones. Another disc-shaped item next to it projected shimmering holograms of mountains, sprawling cities, and vast fields of resources. It was then the true gravity of his situation came crashing down on the stunned village boy. The spiral emblem was no simple marking after all. It was a link to some higher plane of cosmic authority and mastery, a power source Odinka had been chosen to wield. Whether through stumbled accident or grand cosmic design, the unassuming peasant child had been granted the means to influence and reshape the very face of the physical world itself. Odinka now held the ability to summon wealth, recreate civilizations, and alter entire environments in ways that defied the natural order. For several long moments, all Odinka could do was stare down at his trembling hands in open-mouthed awe, utterly overwhelmed by the implications of what was being revealed. This cosmic force and unlimited potential felt like a crushing burden far beyond what any single mortal should have to bear. "I cannot be the one meant for such responsibilities," he whispered, tears brimming in his wide eyes. "I'm just a boy from a poor village. What wisdom or judgment could I possess to handle such powers justly?" The glowing guardian turned its towering presence toward Odinka, studying him intently before responding. "You speak wisely for one so young," it rumbled in that unsettling harmonic voice. "And that humility, compassion, and self-awareness are precisely why you were chosen to bear this great mantle over any other." It extended one long finger to gently tip Odinka's chin upwards until their strange, mismatched gazes met directly. "The path before you now will be one of grave challenges, momentous choices, and great sacrifice," the cosmic entity stated solemnly. "But know that your spiritual essence and strength of character have been meticulously evaluated since the beginning of this age. The guardians believe you to be well equipped, should you choose to accept the quest that has been bestowed." Odinka swallowed hard, both terrified yet somehow deeply emboldened and ready to face whatever metaphysical tests awaited. After all, the young village boy had been granted unimaginable power, but the real challenge now would be how he chose to apply such cosmic influence. Would Odinka uphold integrity and restraint as the strange guardians expected, or might the unlimited potential for wealth ultimately corrupt his noble spirit beyond redemption? Only fate and the choices that lay ahead would decide the path the once humble Nigerian boy now walked.